I didn't know the standing ovation would stop mid-clap when the notifications started going off. My name is Vanessa Chen, and for 8 years, I thought partnership meant sacrifice. The first grant I wrote for Derek was supposed to be temporary. We'd been married for 6 months, and he was struggling with his NIH application. The deadline was in 3 days, and he'd barely finished the abstract. I had a master's in molecular biology and experience writing proposals for my own research before I'd left my position to move with him to Portland. He asked if I could just take a look at what he had. I rewrote the entire thing in 48 hours. Every word, the hypothesis, the methodology, the significance statement, the budget justification. Derek submitted it under his name with me listed nowhere, not as a contributor, not in the acknowledgments, nowhere. 6 months later, he got the funding, $240,000. His department chair called it the most compelling grant application they'd seen from a junior faculty member in years. Derek took me to dinner at a nice restaurant to celebrate. He held my hand across the table and told me I was his good luck charm. I believed him. That first grant became a pattern. Derek would come home stressed about funding deadlines, and I'd step in. I told myself it was temporary, that once he got established, once he made tenure, I'd go back to my own career. I'd put my research on hold to support his, but it wouldn't be forever. The grants got bigger. NIH R01s, NSF Career Awards, foundation grants, private industry partnerships. I learned Derek's research better than he did. I understood the nuances of his work, the gaps in the literature, the innovative angles that made funding agencies excited. I wrote everything in his voice, anticipated reviewer questions, crafted narratives that made complex immunology sound revolutionary. Derek's career exploded. Publications in high-impact journals, speaking invitations, a named professorship, and every single piece of it was built on proposals I'd written while he was at the lab or traveling to conferences or meeting with collaborators who thought he was a genius. I kept telling myself it was partnership, that marriages required compromise, that my turn would come. We had 2 children, Ethan and Lily. Derek said it made sense for me to stay home, at least while they were young. His career was taking off, and someone needed to be present for the kids. I agreed, because the math made sense. His salary could support us. My career had already been on pause for 3 years, but I never stopped writing his grants. I'd work after the kids went to bed, sitting at our kitchen table with Derek's scattered notes and half-finished ideas. He'd dump a folder of papers on me, say something vague about needing to explore the T-cell exhaustion angle, and I'd transform it into a coherent, fundable research plan. I'd send him the draft. He'd skim it, make a few minor edits, and submit. The grants kept getting funded. Derek's reputation kept growing. My name stayed invisible. By year 5, I'd written grants totaling over $3 million. By year 7, Derek was being considered for early tenure. The department was fast-tracking him because of his exceptional productivity and funding success. I was 37 years old with a master's degree I hadn't used professionally in nearly a decade, 2 kids, and a resume gap that made me unemployable in academia. I started to feel the walls closing in. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in October. Derek was preparing for his tenure review, and I was helping him organize his portfolio. Required because he couldn't even compile his own accomplishments without my help. I was going through his CV when I saw the grants listed, every single one. Millions of dollars in funding attributed entirely to him. My work, my words, my ideas, all credited to Derek Ashford, Ph.D., Principal Investigator. In the key personnel sections, where collaborators and contributors were supposed to be listed, my name appeared exactly 0 times. I sat there staring at the document, my hands shaking. Ethan was watching cartoons in the next room. Lily was napping upstairs. Derek was at the university, probably in a meeting about his impending tenure. 8 years, $3 million, hundreds of hours of work, and I was nothing, not even a footnote. That night, Derek came home excited. The tenure committee had greenlit his application. It was moving forward to the college level. He was essentially guaranteed. He opened a bottle of wine, kissed me, told me this was the beginning of our real life, that once he had tenure, we'd have security. We'd be set. "We did it," he said, smiling. Not, "You helped me," not, "I couldn't have done this without you." We, as if he'd included me in anything except the labor. I smiled back, poured myself wine, asked about his day. I wasn't quiet because I was weak.
I was quiet because I was calculating. The next morning, after Derek left for campus and the kids were at school, I went into his home office. I'd always had access. He'd never bothered securing anything because he didn't think I'd need to. Or maybe because he didn't think I'd dare. I found the folder on his computer labeled Grants Submitted. Every proposal from the last 8 years. I checked the file metadata, creation dates, modification dates, author information. Most files showed me as the original creator. The ones Derek had started showed my name taking over authorship within hours, with timestamps proving I'd done the substantive writing. I copied everything to an external hard drive, every draft, every email exchange where Derek sent me his scattered thoughts and I sent back polished proposals, every comment thread where I'd corrected his scientific logic. Then I went deeper. I accessed his university email. He'd given me his password years ago when he'd needed me to respond to something while he was traveling. I searched for keywords: grant, funding, proposal. I found emails to his colleagues, his department chair, his collaborators. In every single one, Derek took full credit. He talked about his grant writing success, his funding strategy. There was one email to a junior colleague asking for advice where Derek literally wrote, "The key is to really understand the review criteria and write directly to what they're looking for. I've developed a pretty successful formula over the years." His formula, the one I'd created. I downloaded everything. Over the next 2 weeks, I did something I hadn't done in 8 years. I researched my own career options. I looked at universities hiring in my field. I found one 3 hours away, Cascade State University, that had an opening for a senior research coordinator position in their immunology department. The job was perfect, managing grant submissions, mentoring junior researchers, coordinating between labs. I applied. I used a version of my resume that included detailed descriptions of grant writing experience. I just didn't specify that the grants had been submitted under someone else's name. Not lying, just strategic omission. They called me for an interview within a week. The interview was a Zoom call during Derek's lab meeting, while my kids were at school. The hiring committee was impressed. They asked about my experience with NIH grants, NSF proposals, foundation funding. I answered every question perfectly because I'd lived this work for 8 years. The department chair, Dr. Marianne Torres, asked a question that made my heart stop. "I notice you've been out of formal academia for several years. What have you been doing to stay current in the field?" I could have deflected. Could have talked about reading journals, attending webinars. Instead, I told her the truth, a version of it. "I've been writing research grants," I said. "For the last 8 years, I've been deeply involved in proposal development for immunology research. I can't go into specifics due to confidentiality, but I've worked on successful NIH R01s, NSF grants, and private foundation applications. I've stayed current because I've been actively contributing to the field, just not in a traditional role." Dr. Torres leaned forward. "That's fascinating. Would you be willing to share writing samples?" My mouth went dry. I'd need to get permission from the PI whose lab I was working with. Of course, we'd need them before making a final decision, but this is very encouraging. I got the job offer 2 days later, contingent on providing 3 grant writing samples and references. I sat with that offer letter for hours. The salary was modest but livable. The position was legitimate, respected. It was my way back into academia. But providing the writing samples meant asking Derek for permission to share work that was legally his, even though I'd written every word. I didn't ask him. I sent Dr. Torres 3 grant proposals I'd written for Derek with all identifying information about him removed. I replaced his name with PI and his institution with Research University. The methodology, the innovation, the impact, all intact, all mine.
I also sent her the metadata files showing I'd created and authored the documents. Dr. Torres called me personally the next day. "Vanessa," she said carefully, "these samples are exceptional, but I need to ask you something directly. Are these grants you wrote for your husband, Derek Ashford?" My blood turned to ice. "How did you—" "I know Derek's work. I've reviewed his grants for NIH study sections. The writing style, the approach, I recognized it immediately. These are his funded grants, aren't they?" I could have lied, could have backtracked. Instead, I told her everything. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Vanessa," Dr. Torres said finally, "what you're describing is academic misconduct. If Derek has been claiming sole authorship on grants you substantially wrote, that's a serious ethical violation. It's also, unfortunately, common, especially with trailing spouses in academia. Can you prove it?" "Yes," I said, "I have everything." "Then I want to make you an offer. Take this position, come work with us, and if you're willing, I'd like to help you tell this story, the right way, through the right channels." 2 weeks later, I accepted the job at Cascade State. I didn't tell Derek I'd applied. I told him I'd been offered a part-time research coordination position through a former colleague. He barely looked up from his laptop. "That's great, honey. Will it interfere with your schedule with the kids?" "I'll make it work," I said. Moving forward felt like waking up from a coma. I started at Cascade State in January. Dr. Torres became not just my supervisor, but my advocate. She introduced me to the university's Research Integrity Office. I showed them everything: the grants, the metadata, the emails, the timeline. They were horrified and unsurprised in equal measure. "We see this a lot," the Research Integrity Officer told me. "Invisible labor, especially from women supporting male partners in STEM, but we rarely see documentation this thorough. You've been keeping records." I hadn't been keeping records for revenge. I'd been keeping records because I'm meticulous, because years of grant writing taught me to document everything, to track versions, to maintain chains of evidence. It just happened to be the perfect paper trail. Dr. Torres suggested something that made my hands shake. Cascade State is launching a new immunology initiative. We're applying for NIH funding. Your expertise would be invaluable. What if you applied as PI? Me, as principal investigator. My name on the grant, my research vision. "I don't have a PhD," I said. "You don't need one for this type of coordination grant. You have a master's and extensive grant writing experience. And Vanessa, you understand this science better than most PhDs I know. You've been writing it for 8 years. I wrote the grant in 6 weeks. It was the easiest thing I'd ever done because for the first time, I wasn't translating someone else's half-formed ideas. I was writing my own vision. A comprehensive training program for early career immunology researchers focused on mentorship, grant writing, and professional development. I submitted it in March, 3 weeks before Derek's tenure decision was scheduled. The same week I submitted my grant, Derek came home furious. Someone from NIH had contacted his department asking for clarification on authorship for several of his grants. They wanted to verify who had contributed to the proposal writing. "It's insane," Derek ranted over dinner. "Like I don't write my own grants. This is exactly the kind of bureaucratic bullshit that wastes everyone's time." Ethan asked what bureaucratic meant. I explained it while watching Derek's face, watching him rant about people questioning his work, his integrity, his authorship. Not once did he look at me. The NIH inquiry went nowhere. Derek's university backed him. He was too valuable, too well-funded. They accepted his explanation that he'd had assistance with editing and formatting, but that all intellectual content was his. I watched that happen and learned something important. Institutions protect their investments. Derek was bringing in millions of dollars. I was nobody. So I stopped trying to work through official channels. I started working through the court of public opinion. I wrote a paper. Not a grant proposal, an academic paper about ghostwriting in STEM, about invisible labor, about how universities benefit from uncredited work while denying the people who do that work any professional standing. I used my own story as a case study. I didn't use Derek's name, but I included enough details that anyone in our field would recognize the pattern. I included data, how many grants, how much funding, the metadata evidence, the email trails. I submitted it to an open access journal focused on research ethics and academic integrity. They accepted it with enthusiastic revisions. The paper was scheduled to publish in May, the same week as the National Immunology Conference, the same conference where Derek was giving a keynote address on his decade of funding success and what it takes to build a competitive research program. Dr. Torres knew about the paper. She knew about the timing. She didn't tell me to stop. Sometimes, she said, the only way to change a broken system is to show everyone exactly how broken it is. My grant got funded. The NIH letter came in April. $280,000 over 3 years. My name as PI, my research program, my career, finally mine. I didn't tell Derek. He was too busy preparing his keynote to notice much of anything. The conference was in Chicago. Derek flew out on a Wednesday.
The keynote was Thursday afternoon, prime speaking slot, massive ballroom, over 800 attendees. The conference was hybrid, in-person and virtual, which meant the keynote would be live-streamed and recorded. I didn't attend. I stayed home with the kids. But Dr. Torres was there. She was chairing a session earlier in the day. She texted me updates. He's here, looks confident, no idea what's coming. My paper was scheduled to publish at 2 p.m. Central Time. Derek's keynote started at 2:30. I sat in my living room with my laptop open, my hands shaking so hard I could barely type. The kids were at school. The house was quiet, except for my heartbeat. At 2 p.m., my phone exploded with notifications. The paper was live. Open access, freely available, already being shared across academic Twitter. The title, Invisible Authorship, a case study in grant writing, gender, and academic credit. I'd included everything, anonymized but specific, the metadata screenshots, the timeline, the funding amounts, the career trajectory of the PI versus the ghostwriter. I'd included quotes from Derek's emails taking credit. I'd included the university's response when questioned. The abstract ended with a single line. This paper argues that academic institutions are complicit in systemic intellectual theft when they benefit from grants written by uncredited contributors. The response was immediate. Researchers started commenting, sharing their own stories, women who'd written their husbands' grants, postdocs who'd written their advisors' proposals, lab managers who'd ghostwritten for entire departments. The hashtag invisible authorship started trending in academic circles. At 2:15, Dr. Torres texted me, "Conference organizers just got word. They're reading your paper right now. People are putting it together." At 2:20, Derek is in the green room. He has no idea. At 2:30, Derek walked on stage. Dr. Torres sent me a photo. He looked confident, polished. The screen behind him showed his title slide, Building a Fundable Research Program, a Decade of Success. The audience applauded. Derek smiled, started his talk. He got about 8 minutes in, talking about his systematic approach to grant writing, when phones started buzzing. Quietly at first, then more obviously. People checking notifications, whispering. Someone in the third row held up their phone to the person next to them. The screen was visible in Dr. Torres's photo. My paper. Derek kept talking, but his rhythm was off. He'd noticed the disturbance. The audience was distracted, reading, comparing the details in my paper to the man on stage. At 2:45, a conference organizer walked on stage, interrupted Derek mid-sentence. There was a brief, tense conversation. Derek's microphone was still on. "I don't understand. What's happening?" The organizer said something inaudible. Derek pulled out his phone. His face went white. The organizer took the microphone. "We're going to take a brief break. Thank you." The live stream cut, but the damage was done. The entire interaction had been broadcast. 800 people in the room and thousands watching virtually had just witnessed Derek Ashford being removed from stage during his own keynote. My phone started ringing. Reporters, other academics, a producer from a podcast about academic culture. I ignored all of it. Dr. Torres called. I answered.
Vanessa, she said, it's chaos here. Derek left the building. The conference organizers issued a statement saying they're reviewing the situation. People are demanding the university investigate. Your paper has been downloaded over 10,000 times in the last hour. I sat on my couch, staring at nothing. What happens now? Now the system that protected him has to respond, because you didn't just accuse him privately, you made it public with evidence in front of the entire field. They can't ignore this. She was right. Derek's university launched an investigation within 3 days. The provost's office issued a statement about their commitment to research integrity. Derek was placed on administrative leave pending review. He called me once. I didn't answer. He sent an email. I read the subject line, "We need to talk," and deleted it. His tenure was postponed indefinitely. Several of his grants were flagged for review by funding agencies. Colleagues started distancing themselves. My paper was downloaded over 100,000 times in the first month. I was invited to speak at conferences, to write op-eds, to join panels about equity in academia. I declined most of them. I wasn't interested in being the face of this movement. I just wanted my career back. 6 months later, Derek's investigation concluded. The university found serious concerns about authorship attribution, but stopped short of formal misconduct findings. They required him to revise his CV and add acknowledgments to past grants. They recommended against tenure. Derek resigned. He took a position at a small teaching college in Montana, as far from our field as he could get without leaving academia entirely. I got promoted at Cascade State. My grant program launched successfully. I started mentoring other women who'd found themselves in similar situations, helping them document their work, claim their contributions. The divorce was finalized last month. I kept the house. Derek got supervised visitation with the kids until he stabilizes in his new position. Ethan asked me recently why Daddy didn't live with us anymore. He's 9 now, old enough to want real answers. I told him the truth, age-appropriate version. Daddy took credit for work that wasn't his, and when I asked him to do the right thing, he couldn't, so we're not partners anymore. Did you get in trouble for telling people? I thought about that. No, sweetheart, I got free. Last week, I received an email from a graduate student at Stanford. She'd read my paper. She'd been writing grants for her advisor for 3 years, getting no credit. She wanted to know how to stop. I wrote back with the same advice I'd tell anyone now. Document everything. Every email, every draft, every contribution. Keep metadata, keep timelines, and when you're ready, don't ask permission to claim what's yours. Tell your story where it can't be buried. I still think about that moment sometimes. Derek on stage, confident and celebrated, seconds before his world shifted. The notifications going off, the realizations spreading through the audience like a current. People ask if I regret going public instead of handling it privately, if I wish I'd tried mediation, quiet settlements, private acknowledgments. I tell them Derek had 8 years to acknowledge my work. He chose not to. He chose to build his entire career on my invisible labor, to take keynote speaking slots about success he didn't earn, to accept tenure for accomplishments that weren't his. I didn't ruin his career. I just stopped letting him steal mine, and I did it in front of everyone who needed to see that this isn't about one bad marriage. It's about a system that relies on invisible work and punishes anyone who makes that work visible. Derek wanted credit for building a fundable research program. I gave him exactly what he earned: accountability. And me? I finally got what I'd been writing toward for 8 years. My name, my grants, my career. Not as someone's invisible support system, but as myself. Turns out, I was always fundable. I just needed to stop writing other people's success stories and start living my own.
You've just stepped into her revenge side, where every wound finds its justice, and every silence ends with truth. If her story struck a chord, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive. Another secret waits in the next video. See how her revenge begins.